Today, we're going to be learning about the history of Indonesia, more specifically in 12 minutes. Link to the original videos down in the description below. If you like the commentaries and discussions we do here on my channel, consider subscribing. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Today, Indonesia is probably most commonly known around the world for one place, Bali. An exotic and romantic vacation spot, so many people view Bali as the representation of Indonesia as a whole. But what about the rest of the nation? How did that one island and the rest that make up the entirety of Indonesia come to be what they are now? Where did the history of Indonesia begin? Like its neighbor of Malaysia, Indonesia can trace its first signs of modern human life all the way back to about 40,000 years ago. Although there is also archaeological evidence suggesting that 40,000 years may be an underestimate, and other ancestors of today's humans may have been present in the region as long as 1.9 million years ago.
Wow. And do we have artifacts? Do you guys have artifacts for that? Like different, cave drawings or maybe, bones? What specific art pieces? I know a lot of things that are being discovered today is like urns. So like not in Indonesia specifically, but just around the world right now, people are finding urns of like old civilizations. So that did actually somehow preserve like the dead in some ways. So there's a lot of things still being discovered. So I just wonder if like what was the evidence y'all found to prove those things to be true? Because that's pretty cool and pretty crazy at the same time. It's pretty cool.
Either way, the earliest reliable evidence of a sophisticated civilization in current-day Indonesia dates back to only about 400 BC. With the discoveries of Indian trade goods in the region and inscriptions found in West Java and eastern Kalimantan, it is
Oh, okay, well there you go. Answers the question.
also believed that trade with China would have been concurrent with the trade between the Indonesian archipelago and India. Commerce with these particular foreign nations would have also brought the religions of Buddhism and Hinduism to the islands, beginning or contributing to the outside influence on the region. Jumping ahead to the 7th century, the powerful trade-oriented Srivijaya Empire, originating from the island of Sumatra, flourished from the Malay Peninsula down to Java. Despite their remarkable success over multiple centuries, the Buddhist empire of Sriwijaya faced its decline after the Chola Empire from India seized their Sumatran territory of Palembang and apprehended their king in 1025.
Dang. That's rough. Well, when the trade is that good, they got to take advantage of it. But I didn't know that India was out here conquering people in the early days. I didn't know about that. I don't know anything about Indian history. So, but believe it or not, my heritage isn't from India. I know a lot of people like to think that it is. It's not.
From that point on, the Sriwijaya Empire essentially collapsed, making room for the Hindu kingdom of the Majapahit Empire. Founded in 1292, the Majapahit Empire rose to dominate the modern-day Indonesian region throughout the 13th and 14th centuries, prospering through trade as the Sriwijaya Empire had done before them. Still, just as their predecessors, the Majapahit Empire hit a wall and began a rapid downfall. Theirs came after the death of one of their leaders, Gajah Mada, in 1364, and the following death of the king Hayam Wuruk in 1389. Leading up to this time, the Islamic faith found its way to the archipelago and began to really take hold over the ensuing centuries. Many different lesser-known sultanates found success throughout the islands as a result, some even outlasting the dominion of the Majapahit Empire. As these kingdoms continued to grow trade in and out of the region, European powers became attracted to the spice market that it offered. The first of such nations to arrive in modern-day Indonesia were the Portuguese and the Spanish in the 16th century. While Spain did attempt to exert some dominance in the Maluku Islands, also known as the Spice Islands, their authority in any part of the Indonesian archipelago was short-lived, due to contesting efforts of Portugal and later the Dutch and British. The Portuguese
Yeah, that's one of the things too. Like you can see consistently when it comes to the European colonial powers, 9 times out of 10 they were fighting each other than they were when it comes to powers, right? If they fought each other more than anything, then they would just leave because it was like it just it wasn't worth it. But at least that makes way for some freedoms for local populations. So it's a in a way it's good that they would give up because they would fight each other so much. But it just sucks that there was so much violence back then.
These were initially triumphant in the Malay Peninsula, capturing Malacca in 1511. From there, they aimed their sights towards the Spice Islands, beginning their bid to take control of the spice trade in 1512.
It's just crazy that Portugal was even that powerful. Whereas like now, today, you don't hear nothing about them really at all. Crazy.
While they had some levels of success, they were fairly quickly pushed out through the arrival of the Dutch by the 17th century. In terms of the colonial powers, the Dutch were surely the most prominent intruder into the Indonesian islands. The first Dutch expedition set off for the archipelago in 1595 under the command of Cornelius de Houtman and dropped anchor at the shore of West Java. Around this time, the
Same thing with the Dutch. I don't really hear about them all too much really nowadays. So it's just kind of crazy how it all worked out.
Dutch East India Company was formed in order to control trade between the Dutch Republic and the nations throughout the Indian Ocean. The Dutch East India Company was given a significant amount of autonomy by the Dutch government, allowing them to dominate trade throughout the East Indies and keep their competitors, notably the British and Portuguese, at bay. While the original focus of the company was to maintain commercial authority and prosperity, they began to shift their attention as they took control of Java and its neighbors. During the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company made a gradual transition from a leading sea and trading power to more of a colonial-type establishment, after centering themselves in the fortified port of Jakarta, Batavia, or modern-day Jakarta. Working to gain more jurisdiction throughout the Indonesian islands, the Dutch East India Company was also able to capture Malacca from the adjacent Malay Peninsula in 1641. When the 18th century came around, though, the company began to struggle with corruption, conflict, and a slow collapse into bankruptcy, which resulted in the Dutch government revoking their charter.
Well, I mean, that's usually what happens when you have corruption. So he literally could have stopped that corruption and then everything else would have made sense. So that's what happens when you're corrupt. That's the thing about corruption, right? Regardless of like colonial powers and all this stuff, this is what people don't realize. Corruption, when it gets to the extreme, will start to eat itself. And what do I mean by that? It'll start destroying itself because the corruption is always, it starts off like this, like a big circle. Everyone's eating, like everybody's getting it. The people that are corrupt are all trying to get a piece of the pie. But as they get more corrupt, the pie gets smaller and smaller and smaller, so less people get a hold of it. Thus, it just gets to like one small. I just made a weird visual to like a small little circle, right? And then it gets even smaller and smaller and smaller until there's nothing left. That is what corruption does to a government, to a power, and then everything after that, it just falls apart. So it all makes sense.
And seizing all of their possessions in 1799. In 1800, the Dutch East Indies was founded, made up of what would later become Indonesia, but for the time being served as the new Dutch colonial administration in the archipelago. This establishment grew over the 19th and part of the 20th century, although some ups and downs such as the Javanese War from 1825 to 1830, ending in a Dutch victory, did exist. Also, in 1825, the Dutch captured Palembang, the former territory of the Sriwijaya Empire. During this period, the Dutch also settled disputes and clashes with Aceh, Lombok, and Sulawesi, and continued to expand their dominion. In the course of the Dutch colonization, the people of the Indonesian islands were treated vastly unfairly. As Dutch priorities shifted more towards agriculture, The local farmers were mandated to set aside 20% of their own property in order to grow crops for the Dutch to export, such as pepper, sugar, cinnamon, tea, and coffee.
20%'s a lot. All this is horrible, by the way. But like, this is the thing. Like, let's say, sorry, it's just so warm in here. I just got out the shower and it's warm, so I take hot showers here. But like, this is what's crazy. Let's say, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's all pretty evil. But it like even at like, why 20%? This is what doesn't make any sense. It's like that's how you know they were greedy, like and corrupt. That they wanted 20% of all crops when it's not like it would. It's just insane. That's a lot, like, percentage wise, especially when you have like a huge population of people there that could benefit from that. These people were pretty messed up. That's how you know they were pretty evil.
And indigo. By the 1870s, the colony moved to a free market system and began to form private plantations, although the local people were still not truly treated justly. Finally, at the very start of...
I mean, yeah, that's unfortunate. That's thank God everyone's free though, or free from the Dutch. I didn't know the Dutch were really like this.
The 20th century, the Dutch installed a new system in order to promote the welfare of the archipelago's locals, known simply as the ethical policy. This new program brought about changes such as the construction of new schools in the region, government reforms that allowed more autonomy for the local officials, and the opportunity for some of the indigenous people to become more educated and learn more about the Western world. Even with these improvements, though, not every local was impacted.
I could figure. I'm sure it's only like a small select of people that were probably even some of the more wealthier locals, I'm sure. So it was even more like it's just it makes sense if this is let's hear it out first. Let's see what he says.
And therefore, many people on the island still felt oppressed by the colonial authority.
Okay, well, he didn't clarify, but like that goes back to the idea of corruption, right? Like even when you're trying to do something good, but you're so corrupt and you're so oppressive that it doesn't even make a difference. Like it actually just doesn't help. And that's like, you can see it. Like, yeah, it's just insane. That's crazy.
Over time, these feelings of resentment culminated in nationalist movements and a push for ultimate independence.
Good.
Unfortunately, for the people of the archipelago, the fight for freedom was swiftly interrupted by the intrusion of the Japanese during World War II. At first, the locals were not completely displeased by what they saw as a liberation from their Dutch oppressors. When the Japanese occupation of the region began, they were quick to win favor from the Indonesian people, doing so through their use of natives for administrative positions, unlike the Dutch and their willingness to support Indonesian nationalists. The successful strategy was only temporary, though, as the Japanese opted to use the Indonesian islands in whatever form best suited them during the war, which drew some disapproval from a number of locals. Still, the relationship between the Japanese and natives was not horrible, and as the Axis power began to face defeat in the World War, they threw their support even further behind the Indonesian independence movement.
That's the perfect, yeah. Talk about perfect timing. Like, because if you really think about it, this is what's really smart about fighting for independence right now. Okay. At least in my opinion, this is what's really smart that the Indonesian people did. Because right at this moment, yes, Japan is occupying Indonesia, but they're really not fighting Indonesia. I mean, I'm sure they are when it comes to smaller skirmishes and stuff, but the war is against a lot other bigger powers. So if let's say Japan's fighting smaller rising movements in Indonesia or America, who do you think their priority is going to be? They'll be like, okay, screw these islands. Like, we're going to go fight America. Like, that's what they're going to do. And so it was actually really smart to fight for independence right here because they're occupied somewhere else. That's actually crazy. And even crazier is that they're the ones that kicked the Dutch out. And so you didn't really have to kick the Dutch out. They did it for you, and they're already losing power, so all you got to do is push them out. That's crazy. Talk about timing. That's actually kind of wild. It was like it was meant to be almost. It was like fate that you guys would be independent. It's pretty cool.
During the latter half of 1944, the Japanese declared their goal of creating a self-governed East Indies, which was later confirmed in August of 1945, when Terauchi Hisaichi, commander of Japan's Southern Expeditionary Army Group, summoned Muhammad Hatta and Sukarno, two Indonesian independence movement leaders, and informed them that Japan intended to make an immediate transfer of independence. The two nationalist men announced Indonesia's independence, declaring it an independent republic. Once word was out of the Japanese surrender to the Allied forces on August 17, 1945. The proclamation of an independent republic was not quite so simple, though.
What?
And sparked a series of clashes between the Indonesians and the colonizing forces of both the British and Dutch. The British were less compelled to fight back, eventually withdrawing as the...
Of course. So as soon as there's a big old vacuum of power, there's always going to be someone trying to fill it. Now, I mean, that kind of makes sense that would happen. Something like that would happen. But it's crazy that the Dutch and the British were like, nah, let's get in there.
Dutch stepped in to try and retake their former possession. After repeated failures, unsuccessful police actions, and growing condemnation from the far west, such as the US, at long last, in the final weeks of 1949, the Dutch recognized Indonesia. The following years marked a time of
Is this video AI? It sounds like it.
Political and constitutional development, accompanied by agricultural and economic ups and downs as well. Beginning first as a parliamentary and of political and as the U.S.
Was there like a weird cut right here?
At long last, in the final weeks of 1949, the Dutch recognized Indonesia. The following years marked a time of political and constitutional...
Okay, it was like a weird cut. But no, I mean, literally, it was like the perfect timing to get independence. Obviously, I'm sure it wasn't easy because independence is never easy. And I think I want to make that very, very clear for those watching. Like, you still had to fight wars. A lot of lives are lost. But it's almost like extremely perfectly timed. Because if you look at some of the other independence movements of other countries, they fight wars that last a very, very long time. Or they fight multiple wars over different decades, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I mean, you guys were fighting for independence, right? But this all kind of happened in like one big swoop, which is pretty crazy. At least if I'm understanding this video correctly. But it's actually pretty incredible that y'all took advantage of that opportunity and said, you know what, now is the time. Now is the time. We got to fight for it harder now than ever.
Institutional development, accompanied by agricultural and economic ups and downs as well. Beginning first as a parliamentary democracy, subsequently following what then-President Sukarno called a guided democracy, started in February of 1957. The republic then fell into the hands of a dictator, former General Suharto, in 1966, before finally returning to a democracy as of 1999.
That's pretty recent. The thing is this, like, I think people don't realize that dictatorships, regardless of how long they last, they do a lot of generational damage. So, like, if you have a dictator for, let's say, I don't know, 30 years, that can set your country back 100 years, 150 years. So there's a lot of struggles that you're going to inherit when you have a dictatorship. I'm not just saying this because I think democracy works best, but it's just shown that democracy works best. So versus dictatorships, because dictatorships, once that dictator dies or something happens to that leader, everything else collapses and you have to start over. So it's like, yeah, dictatorships is crazy. But also the fact that it's only 1990 that that this finally switched over.
Today, Indonesia is still growing and developing as an independent nation, and an overall population of roughly 273.5 million
Incredible. That's a lot of people. I'm never gonna not be surprised by that many people. That's a lot.
people in 2020.
And I say it because it's islands. Like it would be different if it was like a one giant continent, like or one giant island. You know what I mean? Like a giant piece of, but it's all a bunch of little things. So it's just crazy that many people live in those islands.
The Republic of Indonesia is now led by their 7th president, President Joko Widodo of the PDIP, or Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle.
Which I don't know really what that means, like for Indonesia. But did you guys ever get to? Because the thing is, it seems like what I'm seeing is, regardless of leadership, regardless of who was colonizing, regardless of who was in charge, it seemed like the biggest problem, at least in my opinion, from an outside person, outside point of view, is there was just a lot of corruption always, feels like. Which is really interesting because it's like you guys made a lot of progress and overcome a lot, but that still becomes like an issue over and over again. And I think which I don't know if it's easy to fix. Okay, I'm not like saying this is like something that you can fix or can or can't fix, but I think the reason why I'm bringing this up, but it's because I think it just goes to show how valuable and how important your country is, that it's so tempting to people who are whoever's in charge to take advantage of that. So I think, it's a double-edged sword. You have a great country with great resources, great people. It's just tempting that somebody whoever's in power might want to take advantage of that. So I think, I don't know. I don't know the political situation, and I don't really want to get into all that because I don't really know anything about it, current politics or anything like that. But I'm just judging based on like the history of it. Because if we look again, and the example I give is like, even when the Dutch tried to do something right, it didn't really work because they were still so corrupt and not really trying to help the people. Does that make sense? Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Love you guys. Check it out. This video is brought to you actually by viewers like you. Thank you so much for subscribing and being part of my journey and allowing me to be a part of yours. Let's create new memories this 2025 on our road to 1 million subscribers. And with all that jazz out of the way, I just want to say thank you so much. I love y'all and enjoy the video.